Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is June 19th. I think that might be Juneteenth. Maybe that was yesterday. A newer holiday being celebrated, not particularly a newer holiday in the United States, where it was the last day that they actually told slaves in Texas that the Emancipation Proclamation had happened and that they had been free for, I believe it was months. I don't think it went into years, but yeah, there was just a delay in sending messages and a active desire not to tell them, uh, and further exploit slavery. But yeah, I don't know if it's really a federal holiday, particularly considering the way the government is running these days in the United States. But it might be a bank holiday or something like that too. So are we going to see any Juneteenth video game sales? I mean, must capitalism corrupt everything? First, it would be the first question there, and probably not, because video games in general don't want to touch upon slavery at all. Yeah, I don't know if there is a single game that I can name where slavery, American slavery in particular, is really touched upon, or even like UK colonial empire slavery or any other country's slavery is really touched upon. Let's scroll down the SteamDB 24-hour peak concurrent chart while I think about that for a second. Yeah. Some of the like strategy play as pirates games definitely should be touching upon that, but yeah, they kind of, I imagine with even the Black Flag remake there is probably an argument that there should be some kind of slave on the ships of some of those pirate ships at that time, but they'll just ignore it and they'll pretend like it. Assassin's Creed Shadow, that black samurai character was literally a slave sold to a Japanese emperor. I wouldn't be surprised if that isn't actually mentioned, or if it's mentioned briefly at the beginning and then quickly forgotten. Which increasingly I'm realizing that there are just topics and things that game developers have been unable or unwilling to include in games, which it is a very narrow, silly argument to make in modern times that our video games art, but it does, a variation on that argument still is valid, I think, to have, in that the question is, are there any video games out there that are controversial art? And yeah, I don't know if there really is that much of that going on, but yeah, the need to sell thousands of copies, hundreds of thousands of copies of video games, perhaps dulls the paintbrush of the artist to the point where, as I've been talking about in the past couple of streams, there seems to be no depiction of anyone actually going through a full-term pregnancy. They just get pregnant and then usually the next day have the baby, if it happens at all, or they immediately have a baby, in something like Pokemon, and like only one horror game, Stasis, actually has a character who just happens to be pregnant. Which, yeah, GTA is about to come out, and they probably will have some third tier, fourth tier, fifth tier character who is pregnant, just to make fun of like unwed pregnancy, undereducated people in Florida, which is what the city of GTA 6 is copying. but I doubt it would be a real plot point. And then I heard an interesting argument that I really cannot buy, that like zombieism is technically a form of propagation / pregnancy, and I'm like, no, I don't think you're really getting into the same spirit when you're saying somebody infected with a zombie virus is actually impregnated, or like the Baldur's Gate 3 brain flayer slugs in the ears of the characters is a form of pregnancy. It's like, no, that's parasitic in nature. You don't consider zygotes of the same species to be parasites. Babies aren't parasites, although they may act somewhat parasitic in nature. Yeah, and I guess that's a big part of the Hellraiser game in particular, where it is potentially very important, and where The Witcher 3 was very important in the past, is that at least those games seem like they were willing to go a little bit more off the normal path of trying to make everything as maximally sellable. And yeah, people have been certainly rightfully complaining about the debanking and soft censorship, or hard censorship really, that Visa and MasterCard and PayPal have been doing. But we really need to go back in time and recognize that Walmart and Target have been doing the same thing for a very long time, and the ESRB in particular has been doing the same thing for a very long time. Walmart has certainly a set of extra rules that would eliminate a video game or a movie or anything else from being sold in their stores. And if Walmart's not selling your game on their shelves, at least in the old days, that was a complete commercial flop, guaranteed. We're looking at the most wishlisted games now. Yeah. And I don't even know where you would go to get really crazy, controversial games, video games. Like controversial movies end up on streaming services anyways, or they end up on YouTube. They're still kind of in the same storefront, or at least a secondary storefront, but I wouldn't inherently assume that itch.io or any like other storefront, definitely not like the Epic Game Store, would be the place to put things that were more controversial. It probably also explains why there's not that many Christian or Jesus games, and of the few that come out, they usually are pretty stupid. Alright, so in the last 7 days, one of the biggest games that come out is Sluttopia. Okay. Yeah, as far as gains and wish list, that does perhaps indicate that the last 7-day gains of wishlist is probably the most fair way to see new trending games. And I don't know if it really gives you that much information, because it's really going to tell you far too many games that are gaining just 1,000 wish lists or so. Doesn't inherently mean the games will actually sell. It doesn't mean they will have staying power. And certainly something like The Wolf Among Us 2 was probably going to get 1,000 subs for several weeks. I heard that the Saw Genesis is going to basically have random map design, and that the asynchronous part of the character you're playing as, the judge, I think is what they call him, just has a few on-the-fly decisions he can make to adjust things. Which the idea of a random trap design in a Saw movie doesn't really appeal to me. There's a lot of little things around Saw Genesis that just doesn't make it really feel like a Saw game, and makes it feel like you are going to not have a great experience there. Of course, what do I know? Like, it's an asynchronous players versus player game, so it might very well be super well received amongst that audience, and it may very well be the case that that's exactly what people wanted. Right. So what else have I been doing? This is going to probably be a shorter warm-up section before we jump into the video game news, because yeah, I'm still kind of churning my way through House Flipper, the original House Flipper, and I've done all the email jobs now, and so what I'm just doing is I'm marathoning buying houses and then selling them. And I did find that if you just do absolutely nothing, you'll still make a profit selling a house, but the profit will be about $100, whereas you probably need to make several $1,000s on even a $30,000 house of profit to gain enough money to buy the next house. Inherently, there is a huge gap with the last house being close to, I think, $350,000. It might even be $500,000, and then the absolute last house being $750,000. So, yeah, the thought that you would invest $500,000 into a house, put enough decoration into it to make a profit of another 50% of that, $250,000, is way too ambitious of a thought. It's just not going to happen. So the thought here is just to kind of marathon through all the houses, starting with the cheapest ones, and then stop once we're no longer able to afford anything. Now, if you do buy a $500,000 house, if you have enough money for that, and you sell it, you're going to get that $500,000 back. But whatever profit above that is fairly, seems like it needs to be fairly large. Yeah. And a lot of the houses are pretty boring, and it is going to be 3 hours plus to decorate a lot of houses if I put actual effort into it, which I don't think I really am going to do. I'm ultimately very unhappy with what House Flipper really is. It might very well be a fine game for people who wanted to be a decorator simulator, but the name House Flipper implies you'd actually be flipping houses instead of cleaning houses and decorating houses with a lot of stuff that you really wouldn't sell furnished decorated houses that often. House flippers tend not to do that. They might have a real estate agent come in and stage the house with fake furniture that they would take out once the sale is done. But yeah, to actively decorate a house and sell it furnished is fairly rare. Yeah, there's a complete lack of smart home tech as far as decorating or building a house. There's a complete lack of building your own house from blueprints from scratch. There's lots and lots of features that are missing, and then lots of decorations, all of which I assume are just lightly asset flipped from asset stores, which when House Flipper first came out, they would have been forgiven for that and allowed to do that. In modern times, if House Flipper was brand new, you'd have a whole bunch of AI stuff in it, and even if it was just AI generated stuff on the asset store, uh, people would be upset about that. You'd have a whole bunch of people calling the game an asset flip game. And ironically, I just saw a review for Forza, and apparently there's a whole estate in Forza as a secondary game mechanic where you can just decorate your own house in a driving game, which really goes to show how House Flipper as a concept is really a secondary gameplay mechanic that shouldn't be the main focus. And yeah, it is kind of true that Animal Crossing has been out for a very long time, and they have house decorating, but as a secondary game mechanic. The first game mechanic is doing something else. So to elevate a secondary game mechanic to a first game mechanic often is very difficult and doesn't work. The pipes game in Bioshock, where you hack the concessions in Bioshock 1, for instance, very different game if that was the main game mechanic or the only game mechanic in Bioshock 1 instead of first person shooter, which honestly, I guess the hacking mini game in Bioshock 1 is probably the fourth or fifth game mechanic, because you have shooting and you have magic and you also have running and gunning and not a lot of platforming. But yeah, I'm rushing to try and finish House Flipper to move on to something else. I don't know if I even mentioned I finished watching that anime on Hulu, something Chivalrous Knight. Terrible ending. It pretty obviously got canceled, I would say. That would be my guess. Where the series for the first two episodes laid heavily in the thought that it was just going to be a ecchi anime, as in a lewd anime, with possibility of even it becoming a harem anime, and they very quickly, after the couple of episodes, didn't really want to focus on that and wanted to focus more on a sword fighting tournament arc. And the last 2 or 3 episodes, they straight up must have lost all their budget because the animation went terrible. The main protagonist is basically eliminated from the story, and he's like basically captured, and then he gets free. The main protagonist wins all of his fights perfectly without any real struggle, in the last few episodes at least. And then the episode ends, and the whole series ends with him just saying, I want to be in a family with the girl he met at the beginning. So basically a marriage proposal without actually saying the word marriage. And that's the end of the whole series. It was just like a bait and switch propaganda, Japanese propaganda of pushing the idea of marriage, which, in fairness, in Japan, marriages are decreasing severely. People don't have time, more money, and the whole dating scenario of how it's done in Japan is pretty crazy. But I wouldn't be surprised if marriages are going to start decreasing everywhere, and it's probably a better thing that in a lot of cases you don't involve the government and get married, and instead are just living in sin, as the Christians call it. But yeah, that anime went nowhere. So then I started watching another one that had loner in the name. All these titles are too long for me to really. Isekai as a loner or something was the name of it, but I can't ever remember. They're all very much just bites of candy as far as here's something to watch that will at least be somewhat different and not boring, or not extremely boring at least. The problem with that isekai anime, and it's only a small problem, is that the main protagonist wants to be a loner, but to move the story forward very quickly, he is forced to not be a loner, and he's just an overpowered character that ends up having to save his entire class, who also got isekai'd and should have like way better powers than he does, but don't know how to really apply them and aren't seemingly well versed in the isekais. Mostly he's saving the class, all the girls in the class, which it could have gone down the harem route, except for he really doesn't want to be with any of the girls, because he wants to be a loner. It doesn't really relate to him, so instead what you get is just a bunch of girls looking at him disapprovingly whenever he does something that irritates them. Weirdly, they all stay in their Japanese school outfits the whole time, and you would have thought in an isekai they would have gotten more equipment and gone native in the clothing design, but they didn't. So they stand out very much. But yeah, that anime was fine, particularly since you can just kind of burn through it in a night or two, if you're just going to marathon and skip the credits and things like that. But yeah, I wouldn't really call it special in any way. And then I decided to rewatch John Dies at the End, which is a fairly old movie. Very surreal, silly movie. It has about 3 points where it goes probably for a hard R, when it probably would have worked just as well if it had gone for a PG-13. But watching it probably a second time now in my life, I was less impressed by it. I really am still impressed by its willingness to just do some very surreal, crazy stuff, because you get that very rare. It's kind of like the Fly movie or Eraserhead, things like that. Just really weird and bizarre imagery, but it fails near the back half of the movie to really have a second act and have that second act turn into a complete narrative. So by the end, it's just kind of pointless, and that they're literally just showing more of the movie that could have happened if you just kept on watching in between the credits. Which, yeah, it definitely feels like that it wanted to be a series, like a TV series, which maybe that would have worked, maybe it wouldn't have at the time. But yeah, I'm a little surprised that Bruce Campbell doesn't show up in the movie, because it does certainly have some of that feeling of Ash vs. Evil Dead is, I think, the one that's silly. Or no, Ash vs. Evil Dead is a TV series that is silly, but Evil Dead 2 I think is also a silly one. Army of Darkness is definitely silly. Yeah. And you definitely could have seen Bruce Campbell show up in a series like that and have a new generation of people doing kind of silly horror stuff, monsters. Sword and Staff seems to be launching very well. I'm still playing Memento Mori every now and then. I'm struggling more in the past couple of days to even get the dailies done on that and care about doing the dailies on it. I probably should get rid of Pokemon TCG Pocket and focus exclusively on Memento Mori. I haven't installed any other mobile games to waste my time on. And I'm not really planning on. I have been shown some more ads on Facebook after installing a couple ones for like Isekai Slow Life. But basically at this point, I have to assume that if I'm seeing an ad for it on Facebook, the ad is completely a fake ad lie, and the actual game is nothing like that, what is being depicted. Which, yeah, it really does suck just how bad and how few games are actually worth playing on mobile. Yeah. If there was inequality there, a cell phone should have a dozen or more games on it that were great and totally playable, in the same way that the Game Boy games, when Game Boys came out decades previous, there's just this general thing where you would end up having at least 3 games with you at all times during a Game Boy travel. I know I had a travel case for a Game Boy, which was a hard plastic shell to really protect it, and I believe it was close to 12 slots were in the travel case to hold Game Boy games. So Game Boy games in particular pretty short in their playtime, so that would make a lot of sense. But yeah, Tetris, Super Mario Land, Kirby, Yoshi's Cookie. Yeah, just the original Game Boy there. That's 4 games off the top of my head that you would probably want with you on a Game Boy. And yeah, if I had a cell phone as powerful as cell phones are today when I was a kid, I would definitely want to play tons of games on it, but there's just not a lot of options, particularly for kids, but even for your average adult gamer, there aren't a lot of options. So maybe the argument should have been that when cell phones, Android phones first came out, they would have had some kind of encryption that could have been put on a cartridge or a micro SD card, more than likely, and you would buy these encrypted games and put them on a cartridge. Or really, it should have just been a case that Google should have pushed for games. And I can't blame Linux too much there, because so little of Android really embraced anything Linux. It just built its own operating system on top of it. So it really falls on Google's lack of interest in games, which noticeably Google has always had a lack of interest in games that has led to Android games being very few Android games being really worth playing. Same is true for iOS. They deserve some blame, if not more blame, because there's more people that use Apple phones than Android phones. So if Apple had cared about games, there would be decent games. It's not like there's too many examples of exclusive games on either platform at all. Alright. I heard a rumor that the Steam Machine may start at $1,000. I was kind of already in the mental mindset of the Steam Machine being about $1,600, and maybe it is $1,600 to actually have RAM and everything you really, and a hard drive in it, NVMe hard drive, SSD. But kind of, if I could get a starter thing where it had, if it was only $1,000, I almost am tempted to do that. Like, even though I have a computer I haven't finished building, and I probably need a more powerful computer than most if I'm going to be recording and streaming at the same time. Like, there is just kind of that temptation to have yet another extra computer around, which probably is the last thing I personally need, but yeah. I certainly could see putting a Steam Deck in like a game room or a theater room, Steam Machine in a game room or a theater room, and just playing games there. But then, even if it was $1,000, and if that was the thing I was going to capture footage on, which at some point it almost makes sense that that should be the machine you capture game footage on. If Steam Machines became the default and just a ton of people had them, which that's unlikely to really happen anytime soon, at least. But yeah, I would need like a video capture software, hardware, something to stream footage. Probably, maybe not. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Steam Machine could have OBS running. It's just going to affect performance to some extent. And yeah, Steam Machine is also not going to be pushing things to 4K, 60, 120, 144 hertz standards. I got 100% of every job as far as the email jobs, and then this is the Donald Trump character. Remember, this game is pretty old now, so yeah. There was one character as far as the achievements on House Flipper that I thought I hadn't sold a house to, because you get an achievement for selling to each of the people, and I had already sold a house to that person, so whoops on that. So yeah. But yeah, there's an achievement here for being a millionaire. I don't know what finishing the game actually means. The free Apocalypse DLC gives 3 more achievements. And then there's also just a ton of other DLC achievements, so I would never really 100% all the achievements in the game. Also, I feel like it probably is the case that, yeah, sell 50 houses is never going to happen. But it also feels like you're getting achievements for DLC that you haven't even purchased, which that ought to be not allowed. Like this garden DLC, I don't think I have installed, and yet I did the demo level of it and got an achievement, which sucks if you never buy that DLC and are obsessed with getting all the DLCs. And I think all of these DLCs are pretty okay, but some of them are fairly weird, like when you are adding the Dine Out DLC or a farm. It definitely feels like House Flipper should be more of a game as a service where they would just constantly add content to it instead of trying to sell DLC and now trying to sell remastered version with all the DLC unlocked in it. But yeah, even in that case, it definitely also feels like a games as a service doesn't really make a lot of sense. What would make the most sense is if Amazon.com canceled all its projects at Amazon Games and had them exclusively trying to make a house decorating game that would take the 3D models that Amazon has for almost every product it sells and shove that into the house decorating game. Then with an easy one button click, it takes you to a checkout where you actually buy those items and actually have them in your house. I wouldn't put it past Amazon to be able to even get the blueprints of your house and the layouts of your house without you having to actually type that stuff in. But then, yeah, Amazon would be the one to make a room decorator, house designer app like that, not just a random game company. But yeah, a lot of ways that House Flipper does just feel like it's in the mushy middle between a lot of cleaning simulator games that are better and actual home designer software, home decorator software. Yeah. Let's see, did I do anything else? I don't think so, as far as warm-up goes. Yeah, I guess I don't really have anything else to say. There's another Next Fest. Interesting. Exploration mode, random, personalized. So let's look at what my recommended for me is. It seems to be a collection of games I don't recognize, which makes a lot of sense as far as next. The Order of the Sinking Star is the next Jonathan Blow game. I thought that was already out. A lot of these are things I've already seen and been on the follow list. This Trine 6 that's potentially going to have 6 characters instead of 3 is giving them an opportunity to change up the way it played. This normal game about golf, I saw a YouTube video about this from the creator of this game, talking about how he green screened and rotoscoped live action footage of the golfer instead of making an animated golfer, which, okay, that's one way to do it. I don't know if that really changes that much. Foghorns Drown looks slightly interesting. Yeah. Escape Academy 2. I thought that was out too. Inherently, I think that probably does highlight an issue with all the trailers and announcements for games, is that after the initial viewing of it and the second phase of just forgetting everything that was announced during something like the Summer Games Fest, there is a creeping thought that the games should already be out there. Yeah, your subconscious is not likely very good with time. And so it's going to jump to the thought pretty rapidly that the game is already out, despite the fact that a lot of these games haven't even been announced according to Steam. This forensics crime scene detective might be a very interesting twist on a house cleaning game slash detective game, where I would imagine maybe you're not cleaning at all and maybe you're just doing a detective thing. Alright, so now I want to go back up. If that is the personalized recommendations, my guess is that when I turn it to randomized recommendations, which would probably be more informative for me and most, it is just going to be the exact same games, because while there often are potentially hundreds of games in a Next Fest, I don't think that the ones that actually get promoted on the front page change that much. Although so far we're not really seeing anything repetitive. This all does look like just completely different things. Which, yeah, this is probably a great example of the problem with like the YouTube recommendation algorithm too, that once it pegs you, whether accurately or wrong, as a fan of a certain type of game, it'll just keep on promoting those types of games. It makes a pretty fatal flaw in logic to say that people just want more of things they've already done instead of people want to be surprised, which I guess inherently your average human maybe doesn't want to be surprised, particularly in their entertainment. But knife throwing game, apparently. I personally do want to be surprised, and this darts roguelike is a great example of that. Just something different. Yeah. Inherently, I just don't think I'm like a lot of other people, maybe the average person, in that I find things boring when repeated. John dies at the end, for instance, as a movie I could only watch because it's probably been about 10 years since I watched it last, and I've completely forgotten most of it. But there are definitely a lot of people who are just into watching the same episodes of The Office over and over again. And yeah, I wouldn't do that. I proclaim I love Babylon 5. I've watched Babylon 5 maybe once, 1.5 times, and I haven't watched a single episode of it in probably 20 years. The things I'm willing to rewatch on TV usually are pretty bad things, and I know they're pretty bad things. Like, well, I don't know if I'd watch Sliders. That's what came to mind first. But the Librarian series, and Warehouse 13, and Eureka. A lot of those Sci-Fi Channel shows that were very cheesy. Like, that's not high-end cinema. It's not going to be surprising in any way. I'm supposed to be looking for the Steam machine. That's what I'm supposed to be doing here. I'm trying to see if the reservation thing pops up. Yeah, Tyler McVickerson, who used to be known as Valve News Network, has once again apparently changed his branding to something like the Peaceful Gamer. Like, just increasingly, I guess, going for a different audience. Which is interesting to say the least. Although I don't know how different of an audience he really is going for when he's still mostly getting views talking about Valve and Valve stuff. One good thing about the Steam machines, and maybe this is the best thing that Valve can take from Steam Deck, Steam controllers, Steam frames, Steam machines, is the thought that people at least are not talking about Half-Life 3. They're not really memeing that. They're not really caring about that. There's a different audience now when talking about Valve, talking about at least one real product or two real products now that have come out. There is a lot of discussion and concern about the pricing of the Steam machine, and the Steam frame VR is probably just dead in the water because of the economy. But yeah, at least we're not talking about Half-Life 3. At least we're not talking about Portal 3. Although I still would love a Portal 3, and I just don't think people would have that big of a problem if you did make a Portal 3 or a Left 4 Dead 3. Or if you just remastered all those games once again. Godot, as a programming game engine and programming environment, just came out with a new upgrade. I doubt Valve would abandon the source engine to go to Godot's engine, but it probably should abandon an engine. But what could Valve go to? They don't want to go to anything Microsoft or anything they don't have total control over, which would pretty much mean it would have to be an open source engine like Godot. Logically, if Valve just was trying to make games, they would move over to the Unreal Engine, but they don't want to do business with Epic Games and the Epic Games Store competing against them. And they could go to the Unity engine, but that's probably a dead end in the long run. So it would be really interesting, I suppose, if a new generation of programmers came into Valve, or a lot of enthusiasm came into Valve to port all of the games over to the Godot engine and just backport all the tweaks that are in the source engine, source 2 in particular, into Godot, and stop trying to make their own engine, which isn't really doing anything for them or for the game industry. The funny way, if they did go the Godot engine or something open source like that, a lot of people might become irrelevant in Valve, and I doubt they would get laid off since it's a private company, but you might find that a lot of the older people just start to retire because they don't want to learn how to program in the Godot engine or any new engine, and that was the thing they were doing. And they don't want to just be customer service for Steam, which would be what they'd be assigned to do otherwise, to justify their job and do anything. Yeah. It's a interesting theoretical, but probably not going to actually happen. There was also a demo of the new Unreal Engine 6, which a lot of what that demo showed seemed to be stuff that had already been announced and teased maybe even years ago, and it might very well be the case that optimizing those things and actually getting them in Unreal Engine is just taking a real long time. It did generally seem like Unreal Engine 6 is going to be more focused on performance than visuals, and that might explain why Rocket League is just jumping straight from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 6. It might very well be that Unreal Engine 6 is really just Unreal Engine 5.5. But yeah. one of the major complaints that has been very prominent from DF Retro and others is micro stuttering in Unreal Engine games. Just universally, almost every Unreal Engine game having micro stutterings and bad frame pacing. And while Unreal Engine games look very pretty, they have often performed less than ideal. Alright, well, that's enough warm-up for today. Let's go through the Video Games Chronicle articles and all the other news. Shinobi Art of Vengeance is coming to the Switch 2 in September. There doesn't appear to be an upgrade option for owners of the Switch version. Okay. I'll just leave it at that. Bobby Prince, the composer of Doom's iconic soundtrack, has died at 81. Prince's Doom soundtrack was selected for the preservation in the Library of Congress this year, which really just is a great example of how slow the Library of Congress in the United States has been willing to preserve anything video game related. They should have been doing it decades ago. Yeah. 81 is a decent amount of time to live, but obviously people want to live a lot longer. There was a suggestion I saw of watching this YouTube video that was suggested that had video game music playing and then like recording your reaction to can you guess what the music is. And I pointed out, well, that's not really a great way to present that idea, because the video, first of all, is playing Mario music as the very first thing and has a picture of Mario. So unless you're getting really pedantic and asking for the exact title of that exact theme song, you already know it's Mario. So just saying Mario should be good enough because you saw it. So the suggestion was, don't look at the actual video of the YouTube video, just listen to the music. Which, yeah, there's lots of ways you could do. You could play music and then you could play a reveal at the end of the music visually to tell you the answer instead of just having the answer on screen. So the video itself is just really poorly designed, and it was really old, so I don't know why it was being suggested now. It was like a 6-year-old video. But then you have the whole copyright issue too, in that anybody who's just playing Nintendo music in particular very possibly is going to get content ID'd or copyright struck. It's not really transformative to just try and guess the song you're hearing. The concept as like a party game is not terrible though, so I made the counter suggestion. What you should do is just find a list of songs. Yeah, sorry for Bobby Prince, but I really don't have anything else to say here. Let's see. If I just type in list of, a lot of them are going to be Nintendo, list of video game, and then you probably want theme music, but songs would get you more. But then the thing there is that. So this doesn't immediately on Wikipedia help you know the exact songs because it's saying soundtracks here. But if you just wrote Super Mario Brothers down on a piece of paper, put the paper in a hat, and had people grab one of the pieces of paper and then have them hum the song and let everybody else try and guess what they're humming, that almost certainly wouldn't be content ID'd, captured, or DMCA struck. Even if you're not trying to monetize a video, if it's, you know, blocked in regions because of content ID or DMCA struck, it's blocked everywhere, you're just not, your video is just not going to be seen. As much as YouTube claims that the YouTube recommendation algorithm doesn't consider monetization, the reality is they also claim they have no idea how the algorithm works, and there really is no motivation for YouTube to show a video that's demonetized, because then they're not getting ad revenues. Yeah, and certainly a lot of people who haven't played games, like I haven't played Mega Man 2, so I couldn't tell you what the theme song or any song from Mega Man 2 is. And yeah, so you'd have to be very picky here. I would pick like Super Mario Brothers, Tetris, Doom, maybe, maybe Super Metroid. Yeah, it's really hard to think because I'm not very musical. Donkey Kong Country 2 might have the DK rap in it. There's probably an iconic song in Mario 64. I suppose maybe you could get the iconic songs from these games and try and do a chiptunes version or an 8-bit version of them and play that, or otherwise mangle the sound to avoid content ID. Play it backwards and see if that works. Like Still Alive. Yeah, I'm so not musical myself that I don't think I could even hum Still Alive. And Still Alive is one of the few ones that actually has lyrics to it too, so run into a problem there too. I think there is some thought here to the idea, though, and yeah, Sayonara Wild Hearts definitely feels kind of out of place compared to the rest of these games. But yeah. And here you have 100 best video game songs. Says listened before copyright claim happens. So 15 minutes there. And that's what a lot of these videos, I imagine, are all about. Is just, here's a way to listen to music without having to go through a Nintendo Music app or buy the soundtracks, because Nintendo in particular are probably still trying to sell music tracks. And see, next legitimate link here includes a lot of mobile games. This very possibly should be like a mini game that you would do based on games that you actually reviewed in the year previous. Like Giant Bomb certainly could have done that in their end of the year wrap up, is to say, here's all the games, songs from all the games we reviewed. Let's test somebody's fairly recent memory instead of going back to the beginning of video games. Yeah. So yeah, here's a good list where it's actually telling you specific songs from specific games, and it is going back to older games that are more likely to be seen. Clearly I'm not the right market for this, though, to make a video like that. It's not my style, and I have no musical ability. But it does seem like it's doable. Again, I would say the thing here to do would be to have people hum the song and then have people try and guess it. And then you probably would have a Patreon video that would play the song in its totality, and you would then edit it for the YouTube video down to 10 or 20 seconds of the most exciting part. Basically, this is just Name That Tune, which, in fairness, Name That Tune as a TV show contest hasn't been around for decades. There may have been a revival. Yeah, I wouldn't really blame people for not knowing the California Games theme or the Pitfall theme or anything like that. So yeah, it wasn't a terrible suggestion. It just needed a second pass as far as a thought as to how can you make some kind of integration of video game music or celebration of video game music without smacking your face directly into the YouTube Content ID system. And certainly I imagine people have thought of that and struggled with that in the past and not really found a great solution. Let's see, the Epic Games Launcher is getting a ground up rebuild which will make it boot 5 times faster. It almost certainly speaks to it being way too slow at the moment if it could boot 5 times faster, and it isn't. Yeah. Inherently, if you look at this screen, I guess, my thought would be, when it first boots, it would, to be faster, either show a little intro sequence, or it would just show lower resolution posters images as it's loading in faster images later. Yeah. There is a big difference between booting and booting to a usable state, which is more going to be a matter of opinion. But yeah, I don't think people are not using the Epic Games Launcher because it's slow. People are not using the Epic Games Launcher because it's not Valve, it's not Steam. It doesn't have all the games. It doesn't have a smooth interface. Steam is not even a particularly great client library for games. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement, but it's still miles better than the Epic Game Launcher is at the moment. So yeah, maybe if the Epic Game Store had launched the year after Valve launched, after Steam launched, then there would have been competition this whole time and stores would have gotten better. But there were other storefronts, certainly, when Steam launched, and they really haven't gotten better either. It's not like Amazon.com's video game section is great. It's not like Good Old Games video game site is great. Let's see, a pop-up Valorant themed pub run by the UK YouTuber Big John opens in London this weekend. I have no idea who Big John is. I assume it's this guy. Frankly, anybody and everybody is a YouTuber these days, so them being a YouTuber means nothing. Apparently a project is underway to remaster all 223 issues of the 90s UK publication Sonic the Comic. Sonic the Comic Remastered aims to add a new issue every weekday. So is this some kind of AI upscaling thing? That would be about the only thing that would make sense. And this isn't, they're calling it a comic, but it looks to me like it's more of a Sega in general advertisement. But I don't know, maybe it is that there are just many comics based on characters from Sega instead of a Nintendo Power type thing. Yeah, 1993 to 2002. 39 reprints amongst them. At a certain level, I don't know what should be remastered in a comic like this instead of just re-releasing it. And frankly, it probably should be public domain and just be released in general to everyone. But yeah, if you've got a good quality scan, which this image implies that they have decent quality scans of the original, probably drawn or painted images, that really should be it. The the idea of remastering it is kind of crazy. Let's see. Yeah, and this whole project sounds crazy because the project is not affiliated with Sega or Fleetway, and it is being created out of the appreciation of the original work with no ownership of the original content as claimed. I don't think the UK laws are going to allow for that. I think this project is going to get shut down pretty quickly. Let's see. The remastering work involves using a custom page reconstruction process developed specifically for Sonic the Comic Remastered project. That is nebulous and questionable. Rather than cleaning up old scans, each page is carefully reconstructed to improve readability, reduce comprehension artifacts. Is that how you spell artifacts? With an E in UK? We spell it with an I in the United States. Restore faded colors and produce a cleaner reading experience on modern screens and devices. So yeah, it to me seems like it probably is a process of running some kind of Adobe Photoshop type AI thing on it to sharpen text, maybe completely replace the font with something easier to read. And so maybe these are the final products we're seeing. With my glasses on, I can say I can read all of this without having to zoom in, which is more than I can say for all the text on my screen other times. Well, in fairness, if this is the final product, this looks fine to me. It probably implies that Sonic the Comic has already been scanned in its original form, and there wouldn't really be a reason to rescan it. But yeah, this feels like this is one of those projects that should be more underground and distributed via the Onion router or torrents than getting Video Games Chronicle coverage, which Video Games Chronicle is a UK based site, so they obviously are more excited about this. I suspect is the case that these never came to the United States. Yeah. And then yeah, I would definitely think that Sonic fans of now are probably not the same as Sonic fans of the old days, and there probably aren't that many Sega fans that just want Shinobi or Golden Axe comics or anything like that. Let's see, GTA 6 cover art has been revealed as Rockstar locks in a November release date. Yeah, for some reason they have had a formula that there's always a helicopter in the top left square. I heard. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but I mean, it does kind of make sense that you want to emphasize there are helicopters in the game, and then you want to emphasize that there are people in the game, and so they've got attractive looking people. Then you want to emphasize that there are cars in the game. And then you want to emphasize that there are boats and animals in the game, in this case alligators. And then some more people as far as bad guys. I assume this is a bad guy, although this might just be a rich music producer, which what's the difference really? And then you've got guns in the game, and usually all of these people are slightly bad guys. And then I guess there's going to be motorcycles in the game too, which I'm not sure if that's happened in any of the previous GTA games. And then you've got a possible de-emphasis on alcohol consumption in the game, because while there is a can here in the hand of this lady with a straw coming out of it, I mean, no guarantee that that's alcoholic by any nature. Whereas I feel like the cover art in previous games have shown alcohol. Let's see. Let's do a little research here. GTA cover art. I'm not sure if it's really called the cover art. Just go straight to images, and let's just click on GTA 5. Yeah. Motorcycles in GTA 5. Beautiful lady. Helicopter. Gas mask. Ski-Doo. Guns. Animals. Alright. This one's a little smaller. So GTA Vice City has a lady holding a martini glass. GTA 3 doesn't seem to have anything. GTA San Andreas has a character too provocatively posed. Liberty City Stories. Vice City Stories. GTA 4. Another somewhat provocative posed lady. Really, this just screams how uncreative the cover art is. And there's some alcohol being consumed as far as episodes from Liberty City. So it hasn't really been consistent, has it? This GTA 3 art style in particular seems very off from all the other art styles. Yeah. GTA 3, GTA 1, GTA 2 is not even really shown here. There's a pretty far difference from GTA 3 here and GTA 6 here. So yeah, I was wrong, I will admit it. It's not particularly a de-emphasis on alcohol consumption on the cover art. It's always been that there was a lack of that in the cover art. Although I wouldn't be surprised if there's still a decent amount of it in the game. I do probably have a subconscious fear that may very well be unfounded that GTA 6 is going to be oddly soft-censored compared to even GTA 5, where you would expect GTA 6 to either maintain a level of extreme, if not push the boundaries and go to the next level of extreme. But yeah, I doubt they're going to push the boundaries. Let's see. Final Fantasy VII Revelation director says he's finished it 40 times and he cried every time at one point. He says the scene is essential to the story, which if this is a screenshot of that scene, well, these characters at least are not dead in that scene. I guess I'll just leave it at that. MSI has priced its latest handheld at $1,800, and the exec says it will be a tough year for us and the gamers. There's still potential for more price hikes, its marketing lead warns. In fairness, it has been the case that before the Steam Deck, every single handheld device was extremely overpriced. Maybe not because of what was, maybe not exclusively just because of greed, but definitely some of it was greed, but also because it's just hard to buy components in large enough orders to get a discount and build something that is powerful enough to play games and run Windows, which most of them are running Windows. This has an Intel Arc G3 Extreme CPU and an Intel Arc graphics. I am not sold yet on any Intel Arc products on mobile. Maybe that will be the new competitor, but it certainly won't be the new competitor to things like the Steam Deck at that price point. Yeah. And even with this price raise of the Steam Deck recently, like $900 for a very top of the line Steam Deck OLED is still half of this $1,800. Yeah. They are very much banking on people being desperate for handheld gaming devices that are really computers, and the Steam Deck not being available to undercut them. And we certainly haven't seen anybody say, hey, we saw the price point of the Steam Deck when it first came out, and that pushed us to start to try to optimize and get our price point down. Yeah, that's not what other handheld manufacturers wanted to do, and it definitely goes to show where the market deciding really doesn't happen as much as people preach it does, and that people will simply just not make things that they don't want to make, even if it would be profitable, even if it would be desirable and high in demand. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Tokyo's Shibuya region is giving residents a Final Fantasy IV in-game items for donating their taxes. The gifts are for those who choose to pay their hometown tax to Shibuya. Interesting. I don't know how that works. Under the terms of a hometown tax, Japanese citizens can choose to contribute some of their taxes to regional municipality instead of the central government. This doesn't have to be the area where the citizen currently lives. It can be the area where they grew up, hence the hometown tax name, or which otherwise holds significance for them. In an attempt to convince some citizens to choose their area for hometown tax donation, some municipalities offer local gifts in return for the donation. Well, at a certain point, is that really a gift or is that a purchase? Tokyo has 23 wards, all of which have their own municipality and autonomy, which means each ward also qualifies as an area which can be nominated for the hometown tax. This probably explains a lot as to why Tokyo is so central to Japan, and why every other town basically or ward in this case of Japan is these small dying cities where nobody wants to live there and there are no jobs and there's just never any development going on. And yeah, I imagine if there was something like this in the United States, a system like that in the United States, Washington D.C. would be the place, or New York, or maybe LA would be the three places you could actually see any development, and places like Chicago would be even worse off, as no tax money would be going to the local government. It's probably a pretty bad system they had before this, and this hometown tax concept is interesting that you get to pick, but it's probably still kind of bad because it means that people living in Tokyo may be funding less of Tokyo's own services, which might be a problem in the long run. But yeah, if all the money goes to the federal government, then one single person is going to decide to spend all that money probably on military versus anything more local, fixing potholes and such. Apparently here we have a collegiate attire as one of the gifts, which, yeah, it's a college anime style, little sailor style outfit, and that emblem probably means something. Yeah, Shibuya is giving probably the dog there. Interesting how you have an integration there of politics with and taxes with video games. We might see more of that in the future, although I don't know how well that would really integrate. And usually when politics is mentioned around video games, it is in the form of laws, age verification, censorship. It's not around the idea of, hey, we are trying to be cool with the kids. Yeah, at some level in the United States, for their terrible tax system, they should make a video game where you just file your taxes via video game form. But yeah, they don't want to make it easy. Let's see, Jirachi is coming to Pokemon Pokopia next week for a limited time. I assume that's how you pronounce this character's name. This is probably one of the god level Pokemon that are special, which to me, really only paying attention to Pokemon since up to Mew, I have no idea who this character is. Interestingly, Linus Tech Tips was sent a Pokemon pinball table by Stern to show off, which, yeah, at $10,000 for the middle tier non-limited edition Pokemon table. Buying those things new is prohibitively expensive. Yeah, and you're still going to probably pay $3,000 or $4,000 for an old pinball table that's in good shape and that is actually fun to play. But yeah, the Pokemon pinball table does look pretty decent and does have like 180 Pokemon in it, so it's doing a very small selection of Pokemon past the first 150, and it may very well not even include all of the first 150 Pokemon. Yeah, and Pokopia is a very different game, certainly, than all the other Pokemon games that have come out. And the Pokemon Pinball game will be certainly a very different game. Oh, I was surprised. I've heard about the Stern Spike 3 system as far as their new main CPU to run their pinball games. And Linus Tech Tips was saying it was using a Raspberry Pi. And I thought he meant that it was like a Raspberry Pi. No, it's actually using a Raspberry Pi compute module in it. It is a custom breakout board with connections, and then the compute module screws on top of that. So yeah, this is probably the first commercial instance I've ever seen of the compute module actually being used. The thought with the compute module is that it would become this standardized default computer you could put in your custom hardware like a pinball table, but I haven't seen it actually embraced because I think it's still probably too expensive compared to just having custom chips or an ESP32 directly on your custom circuit board. The idea that you would ever remove the compute module and upgrade it is probably never going to happen, and so it being modular doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, Raspberry Pi is now owned by a new company and really too expensive. It may very well have been that Sturm decided to use the compute module 5 years ago, and now they're regretting the decision. But with the compute module setup, it probably added things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi for free to a pinball table, which then allows you to have a login system and a logout and a save game system even for the Pokemon pinball, where you can make some progress and then pause your game and come back the next day. I imagine you'd have to pay another quarter or 50 cents or 75 cents or whatever to continue your game, though. Let's see. Moving on, Epic introduced a major Unreal Engine 5 update that runs twice as fast on the Nintendo Switch 2. UE5's new lighting update features improved performance on the Switch 2. It is weird to think that Unreal Engine may be targeting the Switch 2, but maybe it makes a little bit of sense also to target the Switch 2, because maybe we are just going to see, instead of a PlayStation 7 or an Xbox Helix being this powerful improvement on performance, maybe you'll just see PlayStation and Microsoft realize, hey, we need a handheld device, and now would be the time to put out a handheld device that is not as performant as maybe even an Xbox Series X, but is way cheaper. Yeah, I could see Microsoft coming out with a handheld device, which they said they were partnering with people to do that, and that didn't really go anywhere since then. But if they came out with a handheld Xbox that they could say is twice as powerful as the Switch 2, and they could sell it at $500, $600, or $700 even, that would be something they could come out with while delaying a home console powerhouse device for 4 to 8 years, which, yeah, Microsoft probably is making a mistake just rushing into a Helix new hardware device, because I don't think that's going to help them, while they also are shutting down game companies and running headfirst into irrelevancy. So yeah, Epic revealed the Unreal Engine 6 is integrating AI models so developers can reduce tedious work. Epic claims Unreal Engine 6 is going to change a lot of how games are made. That does create perhaps an interesting problem now, where, how long was this live stream? 2 hours and 15 minutes. I'm not going to sit through any of that. Anything with Unreal Engine in it may very well, by default, have AI in it, and then maybe that takes the pressure off game developers that are using AI, because they can just say, well, we couldn't not use AI because it was in Unreal Engine, and we made our game in Unreal Engine. But it isn't beyond the realm of possibility. I think it's somewhat unlikely that we might just see AI hate be so big that every single game using Unreal Engine 6 gets pushed back. Probably doesn't get boycotted, but gets pushed back because of that. It does seem like the example here is to type in a text description and then the game just AI generates a random location, which might work in one tech demo when they're showing off the absolute perfect scenario, but probably won't work very often. For example, I was trying to see if anybody had even made an image of the Titanic and an iceberg bumping, grinding, dancing with each other. I thought that would be cute. I saw a little meme where it was the Titanic and iceberg, and they said nice bumping into you, as a joke pun. So I was going to take it to the next step and see if it had been done. And no, nobody on the internet that I could find had ever animated that. And then I clicked the AI thing to see what AI would do about that, as far as could it find a picture. And then it just automatically generated a picture, and it totally failed because it generated a picture of the Titanic in the background and then people standing on an iceberg in the foreground dancing, not even bump and grind dancing, which, yeah, bump and grind dancing in particular would be like twerking, and maybe I should have used the word twerking as a more modern phrase, but yeah. So, yeah, when you're trying to do anything creative or crazy, take your pick, AI doesn't understand it and can't create it. When you ask AI to do something what it thinks is normal, it'll give you something normal. But at a certain point, this is going to feel a lot like speed trees too, in that you're just going to have random placements of buildings, and it's maybe not going to matter too much. Let's see, moving on, Rockstar is giving last-gen GTA 5 owners a free upgrade. The PS5 and Xbox Series X and S ports of GTA 5 released in 2022. Noticeably, though, these free upgrades come after they sold the upgrades for a decent amount of time. And I think there was probably some real pushback on them charging money for the free upgrades. We have to remember, like, Rockstar is not really a great company, and them releasing GTA 6 should not just absolve them of all their sins. We should not act like they are the best game publisher out there, because let's face it, they really aren't. They charge a ton of money, they take way too long to make games, they make GTA games, which are the only games that are really exciting. They're sitting on possibilities of better remasters that they're not making. They're sitting on possibilities of sequels for like Bully 2 that they're not making. They're not doing anything creative. They're union busting. They're fighting with and laying off employees. Yeah. Inherently, we would want GTA as a concept to either be cloned a little bit more, but you saw how Mafia, the old country, sold well but not great, or GTA in general just to be in the hands of a better publisher that maybe would license out GTA to several companies to make GTA games. And definitely it is a case that a lot of the reasons why people play GTA is because it has way too much name recognition and it just got way too much news press. The gamer bros, the Halo fans, the Call of Duty fans probably jump into GTA without even thinking about it, when GTA as a game series never really has been that artistically amazing. Not just visually, I mean just as far as gameplay and story and everything. It is also kind of crazy we don't have like a Breaking Bad video game, which would almost certainly, if you were just retelling the events of the TV series in a Breaking Bad video game, that would probably be a lot better of a story. And certainly you could take something like Oz, or some of the old HBO shows, maybe even some of the good stories in NYPD Blue, and turn those into video games and have a better story than GTA does. There are, I suppose, some like Godfather games, but even then I don't think there's a recent Godfather game to mention. The closest, most recent Godfather game I can think of is a pinball table. Capcom has confirmed Dragon's Dogma 2 expansion and Mega Man for Gamescom. Onimusha and Street Fighter make up the rest of Capcom's lineup. I will leave it at that. Okay. Before I jump into the Gamatsu article, I'm going to need to move my recliner legs down and lean forward because I'm pinching a nerve, I think, at this point. I'm going to get a leg cramp, which that doesn't happen to me too often, but better to address it now. Alright, so now we'll go through the Gamatsu articles. Maybe I'll turn the microphone a little bit more to me. Yeah, when I rotate my microphone, it's on a mic stand that's at a 90-degree bend, so when I rotate it, the microphone then goes from being directly flat on like this to 45 degrees off, which is a pretty big difference in the pickup range, I would imagine. I imagine people could definitely hear the difference, and sorry about that, but if I'm going to continue to make content at all, I'm going to have to adjust for how long I'm sitting in chairs and how my body, back, feet, legs all need to move around more than they have in the past. And I probably should have been moving around more in that case too. Moving on. Gamatsu says Persona 4 Revival broadcast is a 22-minute deep dive. Is this already happening? I mean, this is 19 minutes. So there is content here. Yeah. Well, if it was 22 minutes originally, they've censored out in the English version at least 3 minutes of content, with a lot of it being a fuzzy thing. Yeah. The Japanese version here is 22 minutes long, but if we jump forward about 3 minutes, there's about 3 minutes of nothing at the front. So that what they edited out, which is not really censorship, was the weight at the front for the English version. Which, okay, no controversy to see there as far as I can tell. Let's see. Moonlight Pale adds a PS4 and 5 version, Xbox Series and Switch versions. It's a 2D hand-drawn survival style game. Yeah, I think there's too much of this going on. I just don't see why you would want this chibi art style in a survival game. I don't mind that, but I definitely mind that. Yeah, there's breaking tradition in just being illogical, and I just feel like this is really illogical. Because chibi to me feels silly as an art style. It doesn't feel vulnerable as an art style. It doesn't feel scary. It doesn't feel... it might be a little bit of innocence, but in a horror game, the protagonist doesn't really need to be that innocent. Yeah. It would be pretty crazy to make a horror story or game where it's just a bunch of, you know, kindergartners being killed off by some kind of monster. There was one movie I watched where it was an autistic person and they spoke via a tablet or a phone, and there was a monster coming after them and they weren't really being believed that much, and that was an interesting movie, but I don't think you'd want to make it a video game. And that did stand out as how young the main protagonist really was. Yeah, and even in the case of the movie, they had to have a lot of other characters and actors to take up the slack for a child actor. I guess you don't have to do that in a video game. Yeah. Yeah. It would be one of those artistically bold games, certainly, if you were to try to make a game where you're putting children in danger. A lot of people would have problems with that. It may very well not be allowed on Steam if you did that. Let's see, Shinobi Art of Vengeance is coming to Switch 2 on September 24th. We already can see it's very positive on Steam. Harvest Moon's Echoes of Terada debut trailer is available if you want to check that out on Gematsu. Digimon Story Time Stranger free update launches July 9th. It adds Terriermon Assistant, graphics mode options, and more. Photo mode, screen to check Digivolution conditions in the Digifarm, and graphics mode selection options, which makes me feel like it didn't have any graphics mode options, or maybe it didn't have any on PlayStation and Xbox. I would assume it did on PC. Yeah. I suppose there's still just a good following, and there was a decent amount of success here for a Digimon game, but it really still fails to get the coverage I feel like it probably deserves. I did not see a lot of people spend a lot of time in the West, a lot of YouTubers, a lot of game reviewers playing this game, talking about this game. And it's a shame, and it probably just is the case that, yeah, there is only one winner in the category of monster tamer games, creature collector games, and it's Pokemon. And Palmon is then the secondary winner by being sued by the Pokemon company and copying Pokemon as much as possible. And then there's a lot of other games that have creature collector features that just don't get talked about, even if they do have a lot of the might of Bandai Namco behind them. In all fairness, I also didn't play this game, so I am definitely part of the problem too. Let's see, Gecko Gods is coming to the Switch 2 on June 25th alongside a Forgotten Cave update. Is this the one where you play as a gecko? I don't know, let's look. I think it is. Yeah. Now, in this case, that tab was to the right, which I'm happy for that, but one tab to the right more than I was expecting. But that typically happens. It's just due to a small delay. Where are we? My Hero Academia Old Justice is coming to the Switch 2 on September 23rd in Japan, September 4th worldwide. Then I tried to drag a tab, and even trying to drag a tab is a mistake. So I'll have to remember not to do that. Here we can see My Hero Academia Old Justice, though, is mixed reviewed. People are just not enjoying it, I guess. Genshin Impact version Luna 8 update, Song of the Welkin Moon, Chorizo. Chorizo is probably a name, but chorizo with a C is also like a Mexican dish. Sunny Summer Fontanalia. Yeah, we're getting some weird words here that are reminding me of other words, like Fontella, I think, is the dent in the head of newly born babies, or newly born babies' heads being very soft, and you can just push on them and dent them in. You shouldn't, but it can happen. Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised to find that they actually sell bovine colostrum as a herbal vitamin thing that's not been tested by the FDA. Colostrum is the first milk of a pregnant mammal that is in cows, in particular, chock full of cow antibodies and antigens to help the calves build up an immune system. For the most part, in humans, the immune system is transferred via the uterus into a baby, but humans do have colostrum too. But yeah, I don't know how much of that is 100% needed. The first milk is super sweet and kind of sour and disgusting is the description I've heard people who have tasted it, and it's really for just babies. But I could see people desperate with immunity problems or allergy problems trying the bovine colostrum in a pill form, powdered, to see if it helped. And yeah, there is certainly a point there that if you have like radiation therapy and it's killed your immunity, something like that might help. It feels like it might help to a layman. I'm rambling here, but I was just surprised to see that that was even a thing available. We've got a Grinch game, and this one is to the left of the article. Again, like, I have no idea why that is happening. It literally should not be able to be happening, and it is showing that there is a race condition happening that should not be happening amongst Firefox, and that it is running two processes at the same time when one process should be started and always take place after the other. But yeah, we have the Grinch 2 Saves Christmas. There was a Grinch game not a while ago. This may be just where these Dr. Seuss stories end up being, is that they're going to be these somewhat nostalgic things that show up, because let's face it, Dr. Seuss is probably just going to disappear in the next 20 or 30 years. The remakes haven't worked, the live action versions haven't worked. It is similar to the situation with like Cinderella and Disney. Like, they can try every now and then. Disney tries to do something with Cinderella, but it was a thing of its time. Yeah, kids these days are going to want something with Bluey in it. They're not going to want a made-up creature Grinch that doesn't show up anywhere else. I wouldn't be surprised if the Grinch shows up in like Fortnite just because it's a cheap license or something. And yeah, it probably is a case that the Muppets had figured it out decades ago, that if you want to take these old stories and make them relevant, you make the Muppet Christmas Story and you just remake the Christmas Story with Muppets. If Dr. Seuss's estate really knew what they were doing, they would be remaking classic tales with the Grinch and other Dr. Seuss characters, instead of just trying to remake the actual Dr. Seuss stories. And Bluey makes a lot of sense right now for them to have a Bluey Christmas Carol, or a Bluey Grinch Saves Christmas even. But yeah, it's been announced for the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. It's due out September 18th, right in time for Christmas, assuming it doesn't get delayed. At the very least, they are putting it in the right time slot of a couple months before Christmas for an impulse buy. This probably is going to be the worst year yet ever to think that somebody is going to impulse buy any video games at all, particularly a seasonal one, which seasonal games generally just don't work that well. This, I think, is only going to be the cover art reveal in video form. Grand Theft Auto 6 pre-orders open June 25th with the cover art revealed. Yeah. And it is interesting how there is a square version of it being shown in video, and then my stretching CSS is just stretching it out to 16 by 9. Yeah, and it is interesting how that works particularly well in that. Let's see what happens if I open the image in a new tab. Maybe we'll see it at the regular resolution. But it is interesting how easy it is to stretch it out and it still look perfectly fine. Now maybe my stretching didn't do anything here. Maybe this is straight up just what it looks like. Yeah. They may very well have made 16 by 9 versions and 4 by 3 square versions or 1 by 1 square versions. A emphasis on square versions in particular might hint at the thought that a lot of the videos and advertisement on GTA 6 might show up on more vertical TikTok type sites, which is somewhat believable that the kids these days are going to be the ones that are into GTA, and they're going to see it on more vertical sites like TikTok or YouTube Shorts and things like that more than on a TV. Famitsu sales from the 8th to the 14th have been updated. Let's take a quick look here. I think last time when we looked at this chart, there was maybe a surprising number of PS5 hardware units sold. We've got a couple of PS5s in the top 30s as far as games being sold, but it is still very much being dominated by Nintendo Switch 1 and Nintendo Switch 2 games. Yeah. The PlayStation 5 Digital Edition did surprisingly sell well, and I can't help but wonder if that's because the Switch 2 was just in lesser stock. Because it did seem also like there was scalping issues showing up around the Switch 2. I think they also raised the price of all the Switches in Japan, which may have hurt their sales somewhat also. Unfortunately, while this information is somewhat informative, it is also incredibly repetitive and boring. After you watch it for 6 months or so, you realize that you are just getting overwhelmed by Nintendo Switch sales every week in Japan. Yeah. And yeah, it only takes about a couple weeks for you to realize that there are no Xbox sales at all happening in Japan, which is a big problem, certainly for Xbox. A problem that would be very hard to fix. Very, very hard to fix. Trails in the Sky, second chapter, details more characters, orables, arts, and cooking. I don't know what orbital arts are, but I'm not really willing to look into it. I don't really love the green outfits here. It does seem like they're trying to have all of them feel kind of militaristic and have some small amount of uniqueness while being members of the same group. But yeah, that green I think looks pretty terrible. Yeah, and it definitely feels like the Trails series of games is just another one of these JRPG series that I am just never going to have time for. Yeah. And it looks like from these screenshots all the main protagonists don't have that terrible green outfit, so it may not matter that much. Arc System Works Showcase 2026 is set for June 24th. Yet another showcase showing off probably only a couple of games, 3 or 4, but it's basically going to feel like every couple of weeks now we're going to have a situation where the where some new group of games gets announced right up until the end of the year. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink Endless Ragnarok demo is now available. You can see this game is rated very positively on Steam. Yeah, I don't want to do a wishlist cleanup where I just get rid of JRPGs though, but there is a more practical thought that there will just be entire categories of games that are on my wish list that I will never actually consider buying and playing, just because I don't think I have enough time left to play them. By which I mean I think I probably will grow old and die before I got around to finishing all the other games I want to play. Romance of the Three Kingdoms 14 Complete Edition has been announced for the PS4 and 5, Switch and PC. Alright. This game is not available on Steam in the United States. Interesting. Street Fighter 6 DLC character Yasmin launches August 13th. Alright, looks like a kind of cool, bright, colorful new character. Is this a like fighting weapon that actually comes from somewhere? A Mongolian fighting weapon would be my guess from the looks of it. No, Filipino. Hailing from the Philippines, Yasmin learned to fight alongside her Kuya older brother under the guidance of her Lolo grandfather. Okay. And the Daloy Ing Tubig is a quick forward moving knife attack. You can set up or extend combos. Interesting. So that may not actually be the name of the knife, that's just the knife attack. Interesting. So I was several thousand miles too much to the north thinking Mongolia, but yeah, at least I was on the same continent. Yeah, Street Fighter 6 unfortunately is mixed in the last 30 days, and yeah, I don't know if adding a new character, yet another new character, does much there. Inherently, I think what Street Fighter 6 wanted to do, and I think what probably every Street Fighter game after the remakes and re-releases and different versions of Street Fighter 2 have tried to do, is move the story forward and add new characters and transition to new characters, when it almost should have been the case that you took all the Street Fighter characters from Street Fighter 1 and Street Fighter 2 that were popular and just given them their time in the sun and barely added any new characters. Like, it could easily have been, it would have taken some thought and planning, but it could have been the case that the official tournament winner of Street Fighter 2, for instance, maybe would have been Chun-Li. Like, whatever the most popular character is becomes the new bad guy for the next one. And maybe it's not so much even a bad guy situation, it is just them defending their title. Then you potentially could have a lot of Chun-Li fights happen while setting up that maybe Blanca becomes the next victory for the next game, and yeah, or maybe this guy becomes the next big bad guy. Yeah, you could certainly have that be the case, or you could even accelerate it and say in Street Fighter 4 all the characters who are the victors, or that you could play as, or the actual challengers you have to defeat as a new character. You can pick from 4 to 8 new characters to defeat all of the old characters. That would be introducing new characters though, so that does just get back to the problem of having characters you just don't recognize. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 has Spider-Man Brand New Day inspired fresh start suit on July 28th. Is this a new movie? Yeah, I guess Spider-Man Brand New Day is a new Spider-Man movie from... Seems like it says Marvel Studios instead of Sony being branded there. Of course, the Marvel movies at this point are in a very questionable state. I probably should grab Spider-Man 2, even if it is a PlayStation game that's probably not going to lead to a Spider-Man 3 coming to PC. It just being a more kid-friendly game. I would assume it's a kid-friendly, teen-friendly game at least. It makes some sense to me to grab it while I can. Which, yeah, I do have like the God of War reboot game, and I don't know if I really even want to play it at this point. Like, I don't know if it's really going to lead anywhere to play God of War Ragnarok when you then have such a drastic difference in God of War Laufey, potentially, with God of War Laufey potentially not even coming to PC. Let's see, moving on, Call of Duty Black Ops and Call of Duty Black Ops 2 ports have been announced for PlayStation. Both will include campaign, multiplayer, and zombie modes. I would assume Black Ops and Black Ops 2 are really old. Yeah, it came out for the PS3, Xbox 360, Wii, DS, and PC in 2010. PC version may very well not be the best version of the port. I wouldn't be surprised if you actually see the Xbox 360 version being ported to PlayStation in this case, because it might just be easier than trying to port the PlayStation 3 version. And yeah, the Wii and the DS versions would have been fairly different and compromised. Yeah, Xbox 360 and PC versions are still playable on modern hardware through backward compatibilities. For Steam, the PS3 version is not compatible with the PS4 and beyond. But a proper port versus just emulation also implies that they'll put a little effort into it to make it a smoother experience and it running better. It is questionable, though, whether there's a lot of desire for Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, and it is also worth pointing out that Activision Blizzard was acquired by Microsoft, and so this is Activision announcing these ports right now in the middle of Microsoft thinking about shutting down and laying off a bunch of people. Although it may be the case that there is some extra protection around Activision. But also weirdly, this is the case where this is games for PlayStation coming from a Microsoft owned company. Maybe the negotiations and the contracts have already been signed, but you could certainly see Microsoft saying, hey, no, we're going to only port Black Ops and Black Ops 2 to the Xbox and Windows infrastructures, not PlayStation. We're going to make them exclusive. Let's see, Dispatch HR Violations Update is now available. It addresses some censorship on the Switch 2 and Switch. It also adds optional censorship on the PS5 and PC. Interesting. Which for streaming, I guess. That could be helpful. So like the default settings is partial censorship, which gets rid of Invisigal's Dream Audio, which I don't know what that is. And then for Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the Southeast Asia, it's full censorship. And then there are options of blurring, which I don't really want to zoom in on this, versus blacking out, versus just chaotic things, which look like they're just silly censorship. Yeah. Okay. It's a shame when censorship pops its head up. It's basically the only thing I can really say here in that Dispatch obviously had an artistic vision and then got forced into censoring things due to Nintendo policies, due to Steam policies, due to PlayStation 5 policies. And now they're trying to make fun of it or make light of it, but it is a real issue that would not happen in any other form of art that I can think of. Like, sure, maybe movies and production companies of movies push for censorship, and the MPAA pushes for censorship in movies, but you can put out an independent movie and still have people watch it, whereas you basically can't put out an independent video game uncensored and have people be able to even download it. It does perhaps open up the door now, months later, yeah, almost a year later, to playing Dispatch, which undoubtedly some people probably did stream this game and get in trouble because of that, get like strikes on their channel, and undoubtedly a significant number of people like me just chose not to play the game because of the nudity sexual content tags in the game, which probably isn't even a lot of what's in the game, but even one instance is enough to get your channel potentially deleted by YouTube. So wasn't worth the risk. Weirdly, it perhaps also speaks to where word of mouth still trumps mainstream video game journalism and YouTubers and smaller games journalists, because there's plenty of people who have played and reviewed this game. In a lot of ways, this is kind of like at least part of the game mechanic is a telltale visual novel type experience, which you wouldn't expect that many people to be cool with. Yeah, I'm still not 100% sure that it's worth the time though to play Dispatch. Alright, well, before we go to the gaming on Linux, I think I'll take a bathroom break, so I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Let's go through the Gaming on Linux articles now. Pilot a powerful warship in the space bullet heaven roguelike called Sublight. I'm still not a huge fan of these one game promotions from Gaming on Linux, even though that's basically all Gamatsu does. It is just that obviously there's a little bit more picking and choosing happening on Gaming on Linux, and it is more focused on games that actually run on Linux. So the Godot engine 4.7 is bringing out a new asset store, high dynamic range support, and Steam frame support. I saw a separate app not having anything to do with Godot. Also, it has brought wireless gyroscope support to the PlayStation controllers for Windows. It's called like the DXR app or something like that. I wish I had more accurate information to say there. But it is interesting how the drivers by default don't do gyroscope. But what Godot 4.7 is bringing is initial touch support for Wayland on Linux, and there are some bigger things here, obviously. What I love about the Godot engine is its turnaround time. It seems like every couple of months you get a new point version of Godot, and there's just a lot of people working on things to improve things, and unfortunately it just takes such a ridiculously long time to actually make a game that somebody who has started to make a game 4 years ago is probably on Godot Engine 3, not even 4.0, and they almost certainly aren't just upgrading non-stop to every new version to learn new features or improve things, and we still aren't anywhere close to a lot of games coming out on the Godot engine. There will, at least it's my hope, there will be a flood of games that do come out at some point in the future using the Godot engine, echoing the departure from using the Unity engine. That being said, when that flood happens and what that flood looks like could be very different, and the asset store, while necessary, also does bring about some real concerns that the Godot engine will just become the new cheapest game engine you can use to asset flip things as cheaply and as fast as possible. I would also say it's probably better to straight up either go to the Godot's own site and see what they're talking about, or watch a YouTuber show off what they're talking about, because so much of what they're talking about is going to be visual and more complicated. Yeah, one of the things they've got is they've added an EM measurement for emojis or inline photos. So now when it says like pig, you could have a pig emoji or picture next to the pig, and you can scale it correctly to be the same scale of the text regardless of what resolution the screen is on. They also have a custom maximum size now to prevent text input boxes from just stretching across a very wide screen. If you have 3 monitors in a row, in the past it would just stretch to 100% if you told it to stretch to 100%. There's better focus and integration on Android. There's, I guess, a tiny hope there that maybe Godot games for Android might open up the door to new game developers that might open up the door to better Android games. I wouldn't hold my breath for that. It's hard. It's basically impossible to show the difference on YouTube that doesn't support HDR, but you can probably get a general gist of here's standard dynamic range of a very dark image, and here's a high dynamic range image comparison, which hopefully you can see some kind of difference there in that there is more contrast going on. But yeah, on my OLED screen, this section in particular is just completely black, even in the high dynamic range. So if there is something there to see, I can't see it. And yeah, a ton of this stuff is too technical and over my head just as I'm browsing. I could probably wrap my brain around it if I thought about it. The 3D vertex snapping will make making 3D models a little bit less miserable, is how I heard it described, and that you can grab points and have the points snap on these blocks, these 3D models. Which, yeah, the fact that that snapping didn't really exist before is kind of surprising. They have one-way collision support also as a thing, which is interesting. You may not use that as much as in video games, but it definitely feels like something that needed to be something. And then there was something about putting class names in the next to the items and adding a bunch of search bars in places. Apparently improved drag and drop. Here's the font size awareness, where the picture is the same size as the fonts. You have this landmark navigation, which seems to be screen reader support. I saw someone had 3D printed the layout of a bathroom to put on the wall next to the braille sign that said bathroom, and apparently that would make a lot of sense. That would be very helpful to know the layout of a bathroom, to know if you're walking into a stall, is there a urinal in that stall or a toilet in the stall. Although probably if you're blind, there probably is somewhat of a standardness there that the stall furthest to the wall, although how do you know it's the one furthest to the wall is the handicap stall, and that's probably the one you want to go into always. Yeah, it probably is really humiliating to be blind and potentially need somebody with you in the bathroom just to tell you the toilet's in front of you without you having to rub your hands over a whole bunch of filthy things. You have this now 2D scene painter. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but apparently it's a big deal. They also have, I think, a project manager with different versions being a thing. And I think the Unreal Engine also introduced a new system for Unreal Engine 6 as far as project version control, which I think they're calling lore. But in a lot of ways, lore sounded like it was just replacing Git versioning for some reason, which maybe that makes sense, maybe that doesn't. Certainly when we scroll down this, we can see that there's a lot of little things, a lot of very technical things. That you would have to be deep into understanding how to program specifically in Godot to fully understand. They have built-in virtual joysticks, which will let you put something on the screen to show the joystick is moving in one direction or other, or to let you touch on a touchscreen and use a virtual joystick like on an Android. They also allow you to ignore controller events when the game is unfocused, which you would have thought that would have already been available. Part of that also means that Android apps can now be in picture-in-picture mode and it will ignore the inputs. You can identify distinctive keyboards and mice. Interesting. So potentially a case where you could have multiple keyboards or multiple mice for a multiplayer game or multiple input game. Better controller support for iOS. Yeah. Gyro aiming support. I thought that was something new. Let's see. Clear coat improvements. Yeah, before you can see it's kind of a flat with just a little bit of shininess. After you have more shininess. I don't know if you want the shininess. That is going to be an artistic decision. But it does seem like it can be something. This feels like a cartoon. This feels like it's taking a step to trying to be hyper realistic. 3D particles. This looks a lot like the PlayStation intro. And then they have like day one support for the latest XR devices, such as the Steam Frame. Vulkan subsampled images. Let's see what the before versus the after is. That's it. Seems like maybe this is a performance thing, where before it was subsampling way too much and taking way too long, and now it's subsampling less and spacing out the subsampling. Perhaps that's not the best visual example though, because it doesn't really make it plain what's going on here. That's a performance tweak trying to be shown visually. Yeah, Android, they added support for picture-in-picture. They allow moving and resizing an embedded gaming window. Enabled orientation changes of the script editor, which that'll be very helpful, particularly if you're making it on the tablet. Easy customizable splash screens, and apparently tracing. I don't know what tracing means in this case, whether that's drawing things. Apparently you can allow implementing Java interfaces from GDScript on Android. If you still have Java code you need to use. Initial touch support for Wayland. Let's see. So yeah, decent amount of improvements there, and a long list here of people contributing to the game publicly and significantly. Maybe the list needs to be a lot longer than this, but yeah, To me, that is much more a much more exciting list of updates than Unreal Engine 6, which, yeah, Unreal Engine 6 promises maybe better performance and more of the same, so an Unreal Engine game is still just going to look and feel like an Unreal Engine game, just slightly better, where Godot 4.7 feels like it is really opening the door to entirely new games being made or games being ported to Godot. Meanwhile, the Unity announcements are frankly forgettable, because Unity basically couldn't announce anything of interest to most people after its terrible leadership decisions of the past couple of years. Moving on, these are the most played demos of the Steam Next Fest June 2026. There's a whole list here, and normally that would open every single link, but I guess I've limited that. So it's Echoes of Aincrad, Mistfall Hunter, Over the Hill, Iron Nest, Impulse, Dust Front RTS, Embers of Uncrowned, and Bomb Banana, and Casualties Unknown, which, you know, I don't recognize any of those games, even though I should recognize Echoes of Aincrad because that's the Sword Art Online one. It's easily forgotten, I guess. Valve gives more detail on the Steam controller reservations. You'll be waiting a while, so if you're hoping for a new controller soon, good luck. Demand appears to be quite still high and seems far more than Valve can currently make. Valve has announced an update in the reservation system to give a bit more detail. You can expect to receive one if you make a reservation. The good news is that Valve said very clearly, we have no plans to stop making Steam controllers, but due to the demand, they're trying to manage expectations. Steam controller page will now give you a time frame for when you can expect to receive your order. Email based on your reservation by September of 2026, by December of 2026, or in 2027 with additional information on specific timing coming. Which arguably, I mean, it's a pretty safe bet that I should just reserve one controller now, just to expect to have to buy it 7-8 months from now. But yeah, and you don't really have to buy it 6 months from now, so I don't think they're asking for any money now, so yeah, I really should just reserve one. 6 months from now I may very well have bought a Steam machine and want a second controller, or just want a controller to play with. Let's see, Impulse, spelled with an EM, it's basically Titanfall, but from the devs of Splitgate. Okay. Having not played either games, I don't really know too much there. But yeah, I thought a big part of Titanfall was the Titans, and what I'm seeing here is more just running and gunning. I know that there was a lot of people who were excited about Titanfall, at least Titanfall 1, and it didn't lead to any real success, even though there was seemingly a lot of excitement there. Although that might have just been Giant Bomb talking about Titanfall a lot. I certainly got led around by the nose via Giant Bomb about a decade ago when I was listening to Giant Bomb, and just taking their word as gospel without really seeking out other sources or applying any real verification to it. I was younger at the time, more naive, I suppose. I imagine most people were. Definitely I had a habit of being led by the nose via Giant Bomb, and then X-Play before that, and Geek and Sundry, and frankly there just weren't that many other sources for video game news in the first place, so it wasn't blatantly aware and obvious that I was getting my sources of information from one person only, or one group of people only, and that there would be a bias there, and that there would be just an inaccuracy there. Anyways, moving on. Sludge and Years is an oddly satisfying active incremental game about cleaning up pollution. I kind of want to see how this plays. Do I like incremental games is a good question. I'm not sure I do. Like, how sped up is this whole experience? Are we seeing what would be months of work, or are we seeing just minutes or hours of work being sped up? Is this a mini game, this section here where you're doing the cleanup, or is this something you just watch and it plays itself? So it definitely has that incremental feel, and it also has that cleaning feel. So I could see where that would appeal to a lot of people. But yeah, I don't know if I really need to do a deep dive in incremental games. It's funny, they're comparing this to House Flipper, and I guess you do a lot of cleaning in House Flipper. Let's see, Canonical reveals Mina, a speech-to-text system for Ubuntu Linux. It is interesting that they aren't making it more open for other platforms. But yeah, Canonical and Ubuntu does have that problem now, where they are only really trying to promote their flavor of Linux. This is speech to text, not text to speech. Most Linuxes can easily have text to speech, and frankly, most Linuxes have some ability to have speech to text also. I have an app that is on my Steam Deck where you can talk to it and it can talk to you, as far as a notepad thing. The only thing there is that maybe the speech to text would be a lot better than if there was more cooperation, and if you want leaning heavily on Google speech to text algorithms. Yeah. It is worth pointing out, though, that speech to text really plateaued probably 8 to 9 years ago, and it still rather sucks as far as just making closed captions for YouTube videos. And I see the AI speech to text that that Amazon Prime Video uses, and it gets the words wrong all the time. It's very often the case that it gets the words completely wrong, and it's not following any script, and it's not following any logic. It's just spitting out a word based on what it thinks it was said. And that's before you even get into like speech to text from Japanese dubs of anime, where then the words can get really wrong very fast as they're using more obscure words or made up words. Moving on, the Control Resonant game will have Steam Deck support at launch. It's nice, and it seems like that is becoming very often the case, that Steam Deck users are not being put into a second-class citizen state yet. Although it would potentially be a case that people could claim, well, you can't even buy a Steam Deck these days, so why would we focus on Steam Deck support? But I think there's just too much enthusiasm around the Steam Deck for that to really be the case. There's way more enthusiasm than there are actual Steam Deck units for sale out there. Suppose that's an interesting thought, that if Valve really did want to get into the console market more, maybe they could acquire some of the people being shut down and laid off from Microsoft. Almost certainly some of those Microsoft employees are going to go over to Valve. And then all of a sudden, if Valve acquires 3 or 4 studios making games and focusing heavily on having those games play on the Steam machine and the Steam Deck, that could be a big thing. Plus, even bigger than that, Valve could acquire some of the hardware devs that made the Xbox and see if they can help them make more Steam Decks, make more Steam machines. That is an interesting thought. We'll see how much that really happens. You can prepare for the Steam frame with the Upload VR Summer Humble Bundle. Yeah, I definitely would not buy VR games, or VR focused games at least, without having a VR headset already in my possession and being fairly confident that I was going to actually play games in a VR headset. Yeah, that does feel like that would be a huge waste of money. Yeah. These are VR games. The Good Old Games Sale 2026 is live now with thousands of discounts. Interesting, this is probably one of the bigger Good Old Games sales, and this is the first sale we've heard of in a while that didn't also mention that something was being put in the Good Old Games Preservation Program, which honestly, being in the preservation program seems to mean very little. It just means they are doing what they were going to be doing anyways, which is making sure the games can be playable so people will keep buying them. Yeah. We are still extremely far from the point where I think I would start buying games on Good Old Games. I'd have to basically be banned from Steam, at which point I probably would get so frustrated I'd just give up playing PC games or games altogether if I was banned from Steam and lost access to 5,000 games. Yeah, that would be a devastating thing that would almost certainly never happen. Let's see, Valve has updated Proton hotfix for Arc Raiders compatibility on the Linux and SteamOS platforms, specifically SteamOS. Arc Raiders is mixed at 54% in the last 30 days, however. SteamOS 3.8 is out with initial Steam machine support, desktop mode upgrades, and a new graphics driver. Interesting. So does that mean there really hasn't been an upgrade to the graphics drivers in a long time? Because I don't recall them mentioning upgraded graphics drivers. I guess at a certain point it is a big upgrade. They've updated the Arch system base, which means probably a newer kernel, which means probably a newer graphics drivers, which I assume would be Vulkan. I could be wrong. It might be Vulkan. Is an older technology and I just haven't stayed up on it. Definitely seems like there's a fairly long list of upgrades for 3.8. Yeah, and I guess I could upgrade my Steam Deck and will just have to upgrade my Steam Deck, but I don't know if I would really notice that much of a difference. I just don't use my Steam Deck enough. Yeah. They certainly aren't just updating it from one middle number to the next middle number. They skipped all the way to KDE Plasma 6.4. We might be up to 6.7 as far as the newest version of KDE Plasma. So yeah, they are behind making sure things work, I imagine, doing internal testing. But yeah, that's probably for the better for the Steam Deck too, is to just, and SteamOS, to just upgrade infrequently and have it work consistently. It would definitely be a very different experience if the SteamOS was just like CachyOS and it was just constantly updating things and trying to get the most amount of performance possible. I don't think people really are wanting the amount of risk that you would have to take to get the most amount of performance. Undoubtedly, there might be a point where the Steam Deck LCD or the Steam Deck One just is no longer really supported, and at that point you probably will have some kind of third-party root operating system to put on it that might very well be like CachyOS and pushing performance as far as it can go, just to make up for the fact that it would be fairly old as a hardware device. They are moving into Wayland support as just the default for everything. There's an ability to force mono audio, which might be very helpful if you are deaf in one ear and stereo music is playing on both sides instead of being mixed. Much less interesting is NVIDIA's 595.84 release, as far as it's a new NVIDIA graphics card driver for Linux, which if you're running Linux you probably shouldn't have an NVIDIA graphics card. Unfortunately, that is just the case. At some point, maybe NVIDIA graphics cards drivers will become so great and they will be just fully open source, but that hasn't happened in the past decade, so I don't expect it to happen anytime soon. I am still running Windows 10 on my old computer, and I don't plan on changing that, so the NVIDIA card in there gets updated drivers whenever I feel like installing updated drivers, and not a second before then, unless there's some security patch that needs to be installed. Unreal Engine 6 is all about generative AI, Fortnite, and the verse. Yeah, far too much talk about Fortnite when you're talking about the Unreal Engine. Probably far too much focus on making a game engine that supports Fortnite above everything else. Yeah. Let's, just for fairness sake, click on the Unreal Engine 6 post and scroll down and just see how many pictures are shown. Well, compared to the Godot update, none. How much is actually even talked about? Very little. Godot Engine update definitely doing a much better job of informing people of what actually they are looking forward to. And definitely I would say the Unreal Engine 6 announcement feels like a wish list that is being touted as we hope we can do this, we want to do this, whereas the Godot Engine updates are we have done this and this is available now. I guess that is the big difference between talking about a new version and not releasing it at the same time. Right, that's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com articles. There is a report that former Xbox President Sarah Bond and Take-Two CEO Charles Zelnick are linked to Peter Thiel's secret society. A series of leaks have tied multiple current and former video game industry execs to a controversial billionaires invite-only, quote, dialogue conference, which I don't know if we really need to be pedantic about whether it's a secret society or whether it's just a bunch of industry insiders having a conference and talking to each other. People, cabals form and people talk to each other all over the place. The real concern here is Peter Thiel. Sounds like a crazy person every time I hear anything about him, and sounds like he is actively inviting and pushing for the end of society so that he can turn current societies into an aristocrat or corporatocracy or something like that. Something where very, very rich people own and control everyone else to an extreme level beyond what they already own and control. It's a lot more, I think, than just trying to avoid taxes. It's interesting they call him a German American entrepreneur, evoking, I suppose, Nazism is the thought to think here. Yeah, suffice it to say, a lot of people don't like Peter Thiel, and frankly I don't think a lot of people are willing to stand up and defend Peter Thiel either. Yeah. The group convenes at off-the-record retreats to participate in ominously named sessions such as Navigating World War III, Build a Cult, Battlefield Technologies, and How's Your Sex Life? Which these might just be really ridiculous titles. All this being leaked. It probably is decent to know who people are talking to and working with, but it is also worth pointing out that the former Xbox president and Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick may just be social media climbers, and yeah, there was plenty of people, I imagine, that went to Jeffrey Epstein parties and knew nothing about the sex trafficking in the island, but their names are still probably being mentioned there just because they're social climbers and they're rubbing elbows with rich, powerful people. So it's not fair to say somebody is guilty by association unless you're going to make the argument that all rich people are just guilty because they're rich, and the association there is that there's just no moral way that you can become as rich as most rich people are now without stepping on the wages of your employees or doing something incredibly immoral. Like, I welcome anyone to present an example of somebody becoming rich in a moral way, and I will not accept they inherited it from someone else who did immoral things. Yeah, it probably is helpful to have the public spotlight on these secret societies and these secret meetings. It is going to lead to conspiracy thinking, certainly, but it's probably better for society to know than not know. But it is also worth pointing out that, at least in the United States, you have freedom of association, and in the same way that a absolutely broke redneck has the freedom to go to a God hates fags church and associate with people who believe that, a super rich person has the freedom to go to Peter Thiel's dialogue conference and plot for what they think is going to be the end of the world. Perhaps there's an argument that Peter Thiel and these people should be investigated for any potential treasonous activity if they've actually taken steps instead of just thought about it as a thought experiment. Um, there's almost certainly reasons why rich people should be investigated and thrown in jail a lot more. In the same way that a broke redneck going to a church and then buying guns and stockpiling guns in the church really then has ventured into the line of criminal conspiracy instead of just a thought experiment. Unfortunately, a lot of people do get thrown in jail for really just having thought experiments and not acting on it. But typically, the prosecutors and the police wait or entrap people into actually acting on it to get more evidence. We will almost certainly see more names from this group. Maybe they won't actually be video game people though, so we may not see too much more stories on this, and this story may very well die out fairly quickly. Let's see, Pocket Pair's lead on generative AI says gamers don't want it. Pocket Pair Communications Director and Publishing Manager John Buckley doesn't see generative AI ever becoming too prominent, which is perhaps the most accurate understanding of the situation I've seen from a game developer so far. Game developers and publishers in particular, I think, are desperate to use AI, and many companies are desperate to use AI, not even really understanding it, but particularly in video games, we have heard a major pushback against any AI being used. And weirdly, other forms of art like movies and TV have had a lot less pushback, and we will probably see, just like TV using a lot more AI and movies using a lot more AI, and people just won't boycott movies or TVs any more than they're already boycotting the overpriced movies and TVs. Let's see. Vampire Survivors dev is reviewing its Fortnite collab after Epic's AI announcement. Plunko voiced its doubts mere hours after the collaboration's announcement. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see if that actually goes anywhere, or if this is just them feeling like they had to put a comment out when they probably didn't need to put a comment out until they had a final decision. Maybe saying they're reviewing it is the final decision to just hopefully alleviate any complaints for a while until they do it anyways. Like, Don't Nod is pursuing several levers to secure a financial future after Tencent decided against a short-term investment. So this seems like a follow-up where Don't Nod is running out of money. Let's see. Unreal Engine 6 will merge Unreal Engine 5 and UEFN into a single unified engine. I don't even know what UEFN is. Unreal Engine for Fortnite. Okay. Yeah, which it does kind of seem kind of crazy that there would be a separate Unreal Engine just for Fortnite. And yeah, merging Unreal Engine 5 into Unreal Engine 6 in some ways definitely makes sense, but in a lot of ways, I guess the hope is it will just implement function calls better in Unreal Engine 6 than it does in Unreal Engine 5. Otherwise, there won't be that big of a difference between 5 and 6. Let's see. Other Side Entertainment is laying off 17 staff following a game cancellation. It was codenamed Project Argos. Alright, I guess I have to leave it at that. There's a report that Xbox was set on splitting with Ninja Theory when unveiling its new project. Microsoft reported it already planned to sunset or split with Ninja Theory while presenting Senua during the latest showcase. There is also rumors now that not only is Ninja Theory on the chopping block, Compulsion Interactive, I think, the makers, I think that's the makers of South of Midnight. Whoever the makers of South of Midnight are on the chopping block. Double Fine is also on the chopping block. And probably several other game companies. Which, if the makers of South of Midnight get shuttered now, it feels like they probably should have just been shuttered after South of Midnight came out and just didn't get enough advertisement behind it. Double Fine being shuttered or spun off or split probably would be fine. It kind of sucks because maybe you could get a Psychonauts 3 in 10 more years, but you're not going to get much more from Double Fine. Maybe you could take the thought that if Double Fine split, maybe then they'd be a little bit more hungry and make games faster and more often. Yeah. And then I've gone into the rant before that I really think Ninja Theory should have just been in charge of making all the cutscenes for all the other Microsoft companies, which I guess there's going to be fewer of those pretty soon, instead of making Hellblade games. They should have just been making cutscenes, because clearly that is where their skill set lies and their, I would assume, passion lies. It's definitely a case that Senua in the Hellblade series is not anywhere close to the God of War series. So, and I don't think they were even really trying to make it as big or comparable to the God of War series, although they probably should have been trying that from the beginning. Let's see. The Returnal director says he'll be responsibly ambitious to ensure his new studio prospers, which is basically saying nothing. And it might involve the use of generative AI, which is actually saying quite a lot. This is a very long interview article. Rockstar has suffered a legal blow in its union-busting dispute as a trial date has been set. I don't know how big of a legal blow that really is, but I suppose it does mean that this wasn't just dismissed out of hand without hearing any evidence at all. I think that's called en banc, when a judge just issues a decision without even hearing any claims or arguments, and it almost never happens because it really spits in the face of the justice system to have the right to be heard and have your arguments be heard. Of course, this is a UK employment tribunal, so the rules and regulations might very well be very different than the way the law works in the United States, which, let's face it, the union support in the United States is pretty weak. Moving on, Luna Abyss development team has been laid off by Quale. The UK publisher has made the entire development team redundant just weeks after the acclaimed shooter hit shelves. Yeah. The game industry has a major problem, obviously, in that these games are getting made, and then as soon as they go on sale, they're just laying off everybody. Which, who's to say, but I would heavily suspect that if you've been laid off from a company when a game comes out, if the game is a huge success and there would be bonuses to be paid, I would suspect none of those bonuses are going to be paid to people laid off. But yeah, obviously the game industry needs more unionization to prevent people from being laid off, more consistent funding so people don't just run out of money as soon as the game is released, and a job pool for when people are laid off, that they are the first people to be hired at other union shops in the game industry, instead of being replaced by straight out of college kids that probably don't know what they're doing. Inherently, with the current system, a lot of older people who would fight AI are going to get laid off, and a lot of young kids out of college who won't fight AI are going to come in and be told to use AI to do 5 or 6 people's worth of work. Let's see, the EU Commission says it's going to engage with the industry over Stop Killing Games initiative. Yeah, they said they can't propose any legal obligations, but then they did throw out this bone. I think it's still probably BS, and the EU Commission is going to do basically nothing. But they did throw out a bone that they're going to talk with the industry, and maybe they will put some pressure on them. But you're starting with an extremely weak hand intentionally here by saying you can't propose a legal obligation, because no pressure. There can be a whole lot of talk then with nothing actually being done, unless you can threaten actual legal obligations or penalties or taxes or something. Yeah. Let's see, the Treyarch studio head stepped down after 22 years. 2 new co-studio heads will take over for Mark Gordon. Yeah. Even at the top of the level, a lot of times when somebody steps down, they don't really put one person in charge of the businesses. Although maybe that is also a reflection that the game businesses in general acquire and get so big that by the time one studio head steps down, the studio itself is twice as big and really needs 2 people or more to be overseeing it instead of just one leader, decision maker. Let's see. The banned horror game Horses begins recouping its development cost after selling 30,000 copies. They've earned $8,000 from those sales after paying back the title's private investors and the director Andrea Luco Bolero. The company that makes Horses, Santa Regoni, has a lot of more artistic, and this is perhaps one of the few examples of a controversial artistic game. But yeah, Horses, for what it really is versus what perhaps the earlier versions of it were, is not really that controversial or weird. It's just weirder than most by far. And it got banned from Steam based on an earlier version, which really pushes the thought in particular that you have to self-censor before you even submit a early beta version of your game to Steam. Otherwise Steam might ban it and then not accept any more submissions, which they did with Horses, which then arguably led to this situation. Maybe they knew that it was going to lead to this situation, and frankly, $8,000 doesn't seem like you're making a lot of profit, which makes a lot of sense because Horses as a game is pretty garbage and it really doesn't have any reason why you would want to actually play it or look at it. It is very much the case where just watching somebody else speed run through it would still be good enough. Ideally, if you are going to make a controversial art game, it should also be good and should also have a very strong, important message, impactful message. And arguably, maybe Horses was a game where the development was just going really bad, and they knew it was going to be a bad game, so they threw in even more controversy. Alright, moving on. The UK social media ban will restrict high-risk features on game platforms. Platforms that offer communications and live streaming functionality will be impacted by the new legislation. Yeah. Only now has Nintendo started to add their camera feature to the Switch 2 in the video chat thing. And just as soon as Nintendo actually was willing to cross that line, you have UK and other countries restricting those features. Which, in fairness, I don't know what you can do but restrict those features. There's been no other solution offered as far as how easy it seems for adults to end up in inappropriate conversations with kids on video games, in part, significantly in part, because kids are playing games they shouldn't be playing, but also just because adults are playing kids games. And so, yeah. In the same way that you wouldn't let random people come up to your kid and start talking to them in a bar or on the street, letting random people come up to your kid and talk to them online doesn't make a lot of sense. Unfortunately, that's one more thing kids can do being taken away from them unfairly. I saw a Reddit video of a kid going to just play in the park, and immediately somebody's having a problem with a kid being in the park, probably because the kid looked like a minority or that they were poor, and calling the cops on them. Which, yeah, you'll be shocked on how overwatched parks are in the United States by the police, which has led a lot of parks to be completely empty when they should be really overflowing with kids. Yeah, and I guess I'll leave it at that and move on. So here's the report. Multiple Xbox game studio heads are negotiating with Xbox to avoid closure. The update here is Xbox strategic reset appears to be involving shutting down or dissolving less profitable studios. Yeah, the South of Midnight and We Happy Few developer Compulsion Games is the one being mentioned here, which I didn't realize that was also the maker of We Happy Few. Maybe that just highlights a pattern in particular, is that We Happy Few, Compulsion Games really just have not been able to find a good recipe to make games that really sell. Let's see. EA announced an advertising platform to launch ads directly into gameplay, mostly as billboard ads in sports games. Partnerships with Visa, Red Bull, Xfinity, Lowe's, Peacock, and Mountain Dew already in hand. There's a report that 2 former Rare execs are leaving Xbox. The Xbox Game Studios, Craig Duncan, and Xbox Game Studio Chief of Staff Lewis O'Connor are leaving the outfit. Yeah. This might very well be the case that they were asked to leave before they would be laid off and fired. Or it might be the case that they are leaving because they see the ships are sinking and maybe they have a plan to form a new company. Although now would be a very weird time financially to form a new company. If you're forced into it, you're forced into it. Yeah. Inherently, the CEOs of a subsidiary of a company in Microsoft might very well have enough money to get a business loan and start a new company, whereas most people who get laid off just have to struggle to find a new job somewhere else. Most people don't want to be their own boss if it involves investing a ton of money And most people don't have enough credit or the ability to write a business plan to get a loan from a bank to start a new company. If I was Valve, I might very well just be investing in people to start their own companies and as an investor more than hiring people to work at Valve. Yeah, and if I was like super rich, maybe that would make some sense, although it's probably not a very safe investment too. Most games don't make their money back, so you definitely lose out on control if you're not directly hiring people. Anyways, let's go through all the games on Steam now. The system here is all swiped down if I'm not interested in it, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm going to make a YouTube short on it. If I am going to make a YouTube short on it, I will swipe to the right to leave the tab open, and I'll put this on the follow list. In this case, there's already a check box next to it, so I theoretically already have collected the data to at some point maybe make a YouTube short on it. I just am not really working on that project at this point, which I guess that is an example of setting things up and then dropping the ball on the project, because I had that working once and then I stopped scheduling basically all videos. One of my far too many periods of being sick, I think, kicked in, and or one of my even larger amounts of periods of just being lazy kicked in. That might be the other option. It's not real laziness, it's being tired. There's a big difference there. Lazy is when you literally don't want to do something. Being tired is when you want to do something and you just can't. Most of the games that come out on Steam are not worth really mentioning, so you can see where I'm not really saying too much on a lot of these. And depending on my mood in the day, there is a lot of ones that could be on the line that I'll probably let on the follow list. Is this AI? Yep. As the other thing is that I need to just start closing every single tab with AI on it. That will make this whole section much more manageable while having a very strict single rule set. Or it's not 100% single rule set. I'm also not making YouTube shorts or looking at games that have adult content in them or are in the adult section just because of YouTube. This is House Party 8. Is this really from the same people that made House Party 1? No, I don't think it is. So they are trying to create some name confusion between Exit 8 and House Party, which House Party was more of a dating sim sex game. You can see the recommended games here are solely based on tags, so House Party and Loop 8 both are not going to even be recommended between this. It's not the worst thought ever, though, to take a very familiar game, House Party is probably not familiar enough, and do a Loop 8 on it. I would think you would want to do like World 1-1 of Super Mario Brothers in a Loop 8 style, where you'd have to really memorize the layout of World 1-1, and if there is a block in the wrong place, if a Goomba is a little too big or walking weird, you have to turn around. Yeah, that would be an interesting parody game. Is it gonna sell? I don't know. Probably not. Can you just do Mario World 1 over and over again? No. That is another problem. So then we'd have to think of something maybe a little bit more open public domain, or that you owned yourself. Nintendo could do a Loop 8 on Mario World 1-1, but I don't think there's enough transformative going on to do World 1-1 of Super Mario Brothers and not get sued by Nintendo. And almost certainly Nintendo wouldn't want a horror game based on Super Mario Brothers in the first place. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know another game that would be that memorable though. Pac-Man, maybe. I guess that's probably why it hasn't been done, is that it would have to be like Pac-Man, something that's not really randomized, and even Pac-Man's too randomized. You could almost certainly do a mod to Mario as a fan game, but you couldn't sell it. Maybe you could do a public domain movie, but that would be weird to try and turn that into a video game. Yeah, Night of the Living Dead, potentially, if you had that's public domain, so you could take the entirety of Night of the Living Dead as a movie and do a Loop 8 on it, but I don't know how you would vary things easily in that case. Yeah. I don't even know if you could make like a movie, interactive movie, Loop 8 version of that, where you would vary things, spot the glitches of a movie. And that's basically Night of the Living Dead or Steamboat Willie or something, and honestly, people aren't even that familiar with Steamboat Willie or Night of the Living Dead. It really needs to be something everybody has played. Yeah, and I just don't think this painting style is interesting. Probably won't sell. Yeah, if you were to fully make new art and just have the blocks placed in the same place as Super Mario World, and it was just a horror version of Super Mario Brothers World 1-1, would that be enough? I don't think it would be. I think you'd still get sued by Nintendo. Maybe Nintendo wouldn't win the suit, but I think they'd have a very good chance that they would win. And I guess that's why you get back to Loop 8 as a game and its many clones, and they are all based on their own original content, and you have to go through the loops. couple of times. You Are the Monster is already mixed reviewed, unfortunately. Would have given that more of a chance if it was actually even better, slightly better reviewed. Maybe you could do it in collaboration with like Super Meat Boy or something like that. And certainly you could make your own platforming game where you're just stuck in the same platforming level over and over again. And the thought very possibly would be that you would go through level 8 and 8 would be where you get stuck. And so you'd go through like 7 platforming levels before then to see the twist, which might be too many levels to ask somebody to go through, so they'd have to be fairly short levels. But then also you'd have to probably make it secret and not have the number 8 in your game description. And just make it look like a regular platforming game. It would be very much like Frog Fractions. But I guess if you had 7 levels to build on to start with, as far as a platforming game, you could establish some rules and maybe have it more rule based as to what makes sense versus what doesn't make sense. Apparently the Exit 8 movie is decent enough, so I might watch that at some point if I can get around to it. I still every now and then am trying to watch movies based off of video games, despite the fact that the vast majority of them are not worth watching. And I think I've probably backburnered my thought of doing a movie group for a while. It was almost certainly going to be like a year before anything happened there anyways. But I do have other things to prioritize. But who knows, at any point if people actually got on my Discord, which, yeah, I don't know if maybe I should just be on like Blue Sky or something else than Discord, but Discord felt like the right place to manage a community. It definitely may not be the right place to grow a community, however. So that may just be the thing that changes things. This is cutesy, but probably shouldn't put it on the follow list. Creepy game in a creepy warehouse. Probably shouldn't put that on the follow list either. It's tagged as a hidden object game for some reason. Inherently, I guess if you did make a sprite-based Super Mario Brothers style platformer, and then added Loop 8 as a gimmick to it, by the time it came out, people probably won't even remember what Loop 8 is. And frankly, you could have had that idea and done it after PT. Years ago. Yeah, it still doesn't seem like we're going through as many games as we once did. Definitely feels like there might just be less games less games coming out on Steam. Yeah, as far as I can tell. It might very well be that I'm only looking at the first 50 of the games. No, that wouldn't be the case because I didn't even change the macros that open these tabs. So unless something changed about Steam's pages, I should be opening up all the games. I guess what we should do, let's do a little bit of an experiment here. Rogue Jet Fighter. Scroll back very far. We look here. The man behind the trigger was the first game that we looked at. We are now scrolling down to see Rogue Jet Fighter. Let's see, how many games have we possibly gone through so far? Well, I'm not really recognizing any of these at all. And these say they came out on the 17th and these are the 19th, so we possibly did see these in the last stream. So let's find the dividing line, which we did scroll down to the dividing line fairly quickly. Soccer Kid definitely said his Rogue Jet Fighter, the 18th. So, well, wait a minute, that one, and then we saw that one, and that one. This feels like this would have been where we stopped. Okay. So let's see one that looks like it might have been one I put on the follow list. Which is harder said than done. Try Escape to the Afterlife. That's probably not one. Yeah, you can see the vast majority of these are not that interesting. I don't even know if I really care if it really just became the case that I'm pretty sure we saw this one. I am actually only looking at a third of games coming out. But I would like to know if my macros are actually working correctly. Yeah, I'm having to scroll back quite far to find something. I think God for a Day we probably saw. I recognize that game. But that's all the way back to the 16s. I'm trying to see if either one of these would have checkboxes on them, and they don't. Zinless Zone Zero should, but it should already have had one of those anyways. Maybe Karting for Fun. This would have been like 2 streams ago. This one is on the follow list but doesn't have a check mark on it, which does make me also wonder if the check marks are just disappearing like crazy as a thing. Which I do want the timestamp check mark to work, but it may not even be that important for it to work over other things. So that while that could have been described as inconclusive, I'm gonna assume what really is going on there is that all the links are being opened up and there's just fewer games coming out on Steam these days. which I suspect may very well be the case, we definitely do have a feeling that we're seeing less just RPG Maker games and less like asset flip games and hidden object games and puzzle games. So there is probably some curation going on there, or it might just be a reflection on the economy itself. People aren't even willing to spend $100 to asset flip a game in the hopes of making money. Alright, well, whatever the real solution and real answer there is, that's going to have to be the end of this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.